Imagine waking up and thinking it's a good idea to tell the entire internet about the only time when my grandfather spanked my dad. And you're going to understand why I decided to share this particular story to you. So, what happened was that in every Romanian school, there was a picture of the great dear leader above the blackboard. And my dad noticed that particular day that the picture was a little bit tilted, wasn't in pristine condition. So he jokingly tells his friend that the great dear leader seems a little bit drunk today. So my friend tells to another friend, the other friend tells to the teacher tells to the principal, and the principal, instead of reporting it to the secret police, calls my grandfather to school. Now, you have to understand this seems to be a little weird for people who never lived under a dictatorship. They don't really understand what's the big deal. The big deal was that he disrespected the dear leader. And if my father, who was a kid at the time, disrespected the dear leader, that means that he grew up in a household that didn't show respect to the dear leader. So the real person in problem wouldn't be my father, it would be my grandparents. So the principal told my grandparents about this happening. He promised not to file a report if my grandfather issues a quote unquote correction to my father. And that was the only time my father got spanked. And I think I have to share this story so people can understand the brutality that citizens suffer under a dictatorship. The reason this happens, and it happens under almost all dictatorships as well, is because whenever something goes wrong in the country, whenever something doesn't work, in a capitalist economy, people don't really know who to blame. They don't really know who to point their fingers towards. The banks, the politicians. It's like which political party. You see, it's a little bit more ambiguous. In a dictatorship, you know who to blame. Something goes wrong, is the dictator. And the dictator wants to control the population to prevent them from having an uprising. So they're trying to control what people think is acceptable and isn't acceptable to say. And in some extreme cases, the dictator wants to act like a god. He wants to act like going against them is not only impossible but also unthinkable. And this is something that the great dear leader in Romania also wanted to do. There were mythical and folklore stories how he would go into a factory that was on the verge of bankruptcy, and just by pointing his fingers towards a couple of directions and talking to the workers for a couple of minutes, then the factory would not only be averted from bankruptcy, but it would start making more profits than any other factory in the entire country. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about North Korea, which is the place that my great dear leader visited before also starting his cult of personality. You see, in North Korea, every single family needs to have pictures of Kim Jong un and his father. And you need to treat these pictures as if they are real people. There are also strict rules on how you need to set these pictures in your house. They need to be set on the most prominent wall in your living room. And they need to be placed on top of the wall so that the picture is higher than any other person in the house. There are also firm rules on how you need to take care of these pictures. Every day you need to remove any layer of dust that might cover them. And you need to do this because at every point you can get an inspection from the North Korean police who would want to see these pictures and how they are being treated. And if they find any dust, you will get a fine depending on how thick the layer of dust is on the paintings. Ray Cunningham from the United States of Illinois claims that when he visited North Korea 6 times, he witnessed on multiple occasions the reverence with which the Kim portraits are being treated by the Koreans. He said that they're kept on the quote unquote honor wall in the living room, and the wall is clear of anything else except words from the leadership. Group photos with the leaders are also put up. Nation, race, and the Kim family are the concept. To degenerate one is to degenerate all. This is why I keep saying that the communists were far right, because I know some of the policies that the communists in my country used to have. And a lot of people from the mainstream media and even leftists right now would look at those policies and would call the communist far right. For example, the banning of abortions, the focus on nationalism, the very, very tight border control to the point where they would shoot people that tried to jump over the Berlin Wall. Maybe this is a video for another time, but someone coming from Eastern Europe, seeing whenever the left threatens someone of being far right for disagreeing with current leftist political correctness makes me think that, yeah, well, political correctness was quite different in my country during the communists. It was still a concept, it's just it evolves with time to be at the whims of whomever is in charge and whatever policy they want to push. But with that said, let's talk about the pictures. Can you imagine being an American and needing to have a picture of Hillary Clinton in your house that you constantly need to make sure it's in pristine condition, that you constantly have to polish? What about a picture of Obama or a picture of George Bush? How about a picture of Donald Trump that needs to be placed on the highest part of the wall in the living room? I think even Trump supporters wouldn't really appreciate that. But this is how it's like to live under a dictatorship. This is what it's like to live under a communist regime, where even if something is irrational and is being dictated top down by the administration, you still have to do it. Your place is not to question, your place is not to complain, your place is to do. And if you don't do, you're going to get arrested. Now, there are people who would like to do, but they might have other priorities, such as a mother, which instead of rescuing these pictures when her house burned down, she made the illogical decision to rescue her children. Which means that if her kids and the dear leader would be trapped in the same building, she would rescue her kids. Now, that would mean she would deprive the North Koreans of the wisdom and the guidance of the great dear leader, dooming millions of people because of her selfishness, not to put the needs of the many in front of the needs of her. What's fascinating about this is that in North Korea, there is indeed a tradition to reward people that are saving these pictures from natural disasters. So we do see people that do risk their lives in order to save these pictures from a fire or from a flood. And the ones that die while trying to do so are rewarded by the party. For example, when a house burned to death and a 14-year-old girl was found holding the picture of Kim's portrait, the name of the girl, Han Hyun Gyung, 14, was posthumously awarded the Kim Jong Il Youth of Honor Award, and her school changed its name after her in order to honor her memory. Another hero emerged after the blaze in Onsong County, where a young farm boy risked his life by going into the blazing inferno, which was happening at his neighbor's house, and succeeded in saving the pictures of the dear leaders. Because of his brave sacrifice, he was awarded, his name was plastered in North Korean press, and the shame, which was coming from the fact that he served time for a crime recently, was completely removed from the public opinion. So I want people to really understand what a dictatorship means when people are forced to believe in the irrational. To me, this doesn't really seem to be as an ideological issue, because ideology doesn't tell you to worship human portraits to the point where you need to sacrifice your life and go into the blazing inferno. What this is what happens when you give all of the power in a nation. All of the violence done by the state is now in the control of one man. And when you give absolute power to one man, he is going to do everything that he can in order to maintain that power and to make sure that in the future people won't hold him accountable for the mistakes or even the abuses that he has decided to commit. As such, this type of absurdities are being enforced on the public to make sure they obey, to make sure that it is unthinkable not to rise up against the dictator, but to even question the dictator's decisions, or to even blame and put responsibility whenever a problem happens in the nation. And finally, I want to say that I'm really pissed off at American leftists who unquestioningly believed North Korean propaganda. A couple of years ago, an American exchange student went to North Korea and he was accused for stealing a propaganda sign. And the journalists, the open minded thinkers of the West, the people who are allowed to question, the people who are allowed to doubt, looked at this and thought that this is evidence. They thought that, yes, indeed, this is the guy, even though it's a very bad recording. You can't see the person's face. And all I'm seeing is a person that takes the sign down and places it respectfully on the ground. And this was the evidence used against the American citizen to convict him of a crime. He was arrested by the North Korean authorities, admitting his guilt, which is a tactic that we see in China, where people who are writing against the Chinese government in Hong Kong, they are being kidnapped onto mainland China. They issue apologies, and when they return to Hong Kong, they point out that they have been coerced, they were tortured, or they were forced to apologize. And what happened was that this kid apparently was sent back in a state of coma in the United States. And when the doctors investigated, it was from brain damage because he was beaten in Korean prisons. So this was the death of an American, and yet American journalists were talking about how he is suffering from white privilege because he went into another country and he thought that he's at the top of the pyramid, but he found out his place, and the most disgusting things. And even though the North Korean government believes in, as we mentioned, leader, race, and the nation, you have leftist journalists that are for open borders, they're anti-racist, and they don't believe in fascism and authority. And they will defend North Korea just because it has the name communist. It is sickening. It is absolutely sickening. And not only that, but they grew up as part of a middle class in America. And they have access to so many privileges that other people throughout the world do not have. And is America perfect? No, it's not. But it's a lot better than in other places. And because they always tasted freedom, and they always enjoy the benefits that other people don't, their little brains just cannot comprehend what tyranny is actually like. They cannot even imagine that a government would do this to other people, which is why they don't even question it. The very idea that you can be killed, sent to prison, and beaten for disrespecting a sign is a concept that doesn't exist in the free world. The idea that you can have your kids taken to a hospital and not being given treatment because you refuse to rescue a sign, or you can end in a gulag because you do not cry when you find out that your leader is dead. There are things that these people who constantly advocate for communism and socialism and far leftist politics, their brain would just implode the moment their dream would finally be realized, and they would not recognize the reality in which they have created. I think like everyone should have at least a 1 month period, a 1 month trip into North Korea, or hell, at least like a 10-year period where communism is being placed on your country. More than 10 years, I think it would be inhumane, but it would be like a vaccine, like Eastern Europe has. And it manages to recognize some far left policies that they know they're wrong because they already lived through them. And I'll end it here before I go into a long rant. So hopefully you like this video. If you want to see more videos from me, I will remind people that I have a channel where I talk about video games and movies and cultural things rather than political things. And if you want to check it out, there's a link into the description. Just click on the little near, click on the two based that you see now on the screen, and I'll see you all there. Have fun.